Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we're going to be taking a look at some more Alliance War defenses in Tier 1 as requested by many of you after I uploaded my previous Alliance War defense kind of like examination video. You guys wanted to see more of those and I kind of forgot about them a bit. But now we're back on it, and in this video we're going to make it time-wise. I'm going to try and show you our defense first, so NY's defense, and then we're going to take a look at Warlock defense, which is what we are starting the war up against. So we're first going to check out my battle group 3 defense. I'm going to go over a few kind of like key placements, I suppose. And to begin with, you can notice the empty placements. We kind of tend to quite often keep a half of the left side empty, and the argument there is because all of these fights are designed to require specific counters like Psychic Taunt, Starburst, so on and so forth. But at the same time, those fights are not hard, and that was also Kebab's intention while making this map. Is in kind of like left side is to force people have the right counters, middle is combination of skill and having the right counters, and right side is kind of like more so skill based. And therefore left side, if you have appropriate counters, hardly ever gets any kills, especially in section 1. Therefore, so long as we place one champion in each path over there, opponents are still forced to kind of commit the champion to that. Like you need to get a counter for Psychic Taunts, or you need to get a counter for Starburst, and at the same time we are not overcommitting there, and we can place rest of the champions on harder nodes. Also, path 5 initial first section here on 5 is typically extremely easy. There's not much to it, and it hardly ever presents like a problem at all. This time on path 4 we have went with Nick Fury and Domino. Quite often you can see these champion roles kind of like being reversed, and for most part here on node 3 you will find Domino, at least in my experience. That's where I find Domino most of the time. But Quake has been taking care of that, and then you have Domino higher up. So that is kind of like some of the typical champions you're going to see there. And Nick Fury works extremely well with the whole idea of being unstoppable plus having ability to go unblockable. And obviously Domino is always an annoying defender. Where it goes here on the right side, I don't think I should reveal the hidden champs just yet because the war is about to begin. But Thor Ragnarok is always pretty much present somewhere in the Aegis Intercept, Aegis heavy nodes, so on and so forth. Now moving forward on reverse controls, we have Korg, just because Korg is always a fairly annoying champion to deal with, and if you have to deal with Korg on reverse controls, that might be quite annoying. Havoc has gone up to aspect of evolution, no, but close encounters, Hurt Locker. I'm not entirely sure why our battle group chose to place him there, but let's examine some of the more important nodes afterwards. So we can see that we have Agent Venom at Safeguard node. That typically is a very tricky node. In this case, my alliance hasn't like made too big of a commitment there, I suppose, and kept the key champions elsewhere. Now we do have Dr. Doom as a final boss, and Dr. Doom also there are 3 mini bosses of Dr. Doom, so we clearly are scrapping diversity for most part here. Truth be told is because we're not taking this AW season like overly serious, just because our main focus currently is on Abyss. But the Dr. Doom is definitely a quite annoying opponent to face on pretty much most of the tricky nodes, just because of that shock debuff, and you ever get the shock debuff on you, he can always just try and charge heavy attack, which he often does, and he's bulky, and his aura makes it very hard to execute special attacks, and it's a tricky guy to fight up against. I'd arguably say that he's one of the toughest defenders that got introduced in last year, and also the fact that he's relatively new kind of means that many people don't know how to play around him too well. So for now it's still a good time to kind of capitalize on Dr. Doom. Now we have counter tactics with Warlock. Warlock is also pretty much always quite an annoying defender for most part, just because he's one of those guys where you ideally want to take off willpower if you run it, to face him off against war, and many people just get lazy, they don't do that, and if they don't, then the fight goes downhill if you can't finish it extremely quickly. Plus the fact that you can't really crit against him on special attacks unless you armor break him first, always kind of make him an annoying defender. So now I'm gonna go and take a look at the global node. Global node, we have used Siphon, and unfortunately Siphon is kind of monopolizing the global nodes pretty much everywhere, because Kabam definitely didn't make it balanced, and before that we had Bulwark and what else, Dodge as the favorite global nodes to use. Then Siphon pretty much now declared a monopoly on the global nodes, and pretty much every single war that I have played, our opponents have been using Siphon. So that's quite an annoying thing. I mainly use Quake in Alliance War, so I can kind of like bypass it for the most part, but it's still a really annoying node to deal with in normal circumstances. Another quick shout out here is the Vision Arcus. Vision Arcus is like pretty much tailor-made for the enhanced power gain, enhanced special 2 node, because he has his own extra power gain. His level 2 is difficult to evade, it's tricky to play around him, and you need to have specific counters, and this guy is arguably one of the more annoying champions to place on this node, and he quite often does get kills in because of increased power gain plus his own power gain, and he's semi-immune to power control, you can say, and the fact that he can shrug off non-damaging debuffs just make it for a really annoying fight, and having it on a node like this makes it extremely high pressure from the beginning, because he's going to continuously start gaining power. You need to be able to bait out those special ones quickly or push him to level 3 and try and tank those, and yeah, it's always a quite difficult fight over there. And then moving here on the right side, we can see that we are using a Mysterio for Empowered Immunity and Buffet node. Now that is kind of also fairly interesting, because Mysterio is immune to ability accuracy, so that Buffet is pretty much always going to trigger. Plus he's also a fairly difficult opponent to face off against in most situations, because you can't manage his special attacks, and it's quite annoying to play around his special attacks, and that is definitely what makes him extremely hard. And another shout out definitely has to go to the Thing here on Encroaching Stun. See it extremely often plays there, because Encroaching Stun is a annoying node to play around, and the Thing is an annoying champion to play around as well, and there aren't like too many great counters for this guy, for this node. And the fact with the Thing that you kind of have to bait out his special attacks at certain times, and you cannot always rely on that, also kind of means you have less time to drop your own special attacks, and with Encroaching Stun that's kind of like high pressure situation. So a Thing I feel is fairly common and definitely a good placement over there overall. Now we can jump on to Battle Group 2, check out what's happening there. We have the same placement there for Colossus, maxed out Colossus on Immunity node. This is actually another kind of like a fairly annoying placement, because whenever Immunity protects Colossus from any effect, so in this case even if opponent tried to parry this Colossus, he would gain an armor buff, and that means he gets bulkier and bulkier. It's just one of those little tricks where you combine a node that seemingly doesn't affect many champions too much, aside from giving them immunity, but in this case it also kind of like enhances Colossus abilities, because yeah, he would gain an armor buff every time he would try to get stunned or would get any debuff applied to him. Since he's immune to everything now, he would also gain an armor buff, so that is definitely quite interesting placement. I think here we are checking out Anova as a final boss. I actually haven't seen or heard too much about Nova and how he does, but it definitely does seem interesting, definitely has some potential. And the fact that Nova is a new champion, and pretty much any new champion that's relatively decent defender always does well as a boss initially, for like the first month when they come out or so. And we have Havoc on enhanced level 1 node, plus increased physical resistance and stun immunity. We have Dormammu here on Dismay. domino on recovery, and the fact of the matter is, it doesn't really matter too much which champions you place on these minibus nodes, because so long as you play somebody that's relatively decent to fight off against, there is a chance opponent will die just because of increased attack and if the fight's relatively somewhat tricky. But then again, at the same time, these final mini-boss nodes don't often do get too many kills, especially most of them. If I would have to point out which two nodes typically at the end get any kills whatsoever, would be the increased power gain node and the fully debuff immune node. Because for the rest of them, for most part, you get your most skilled players of the battle group here, because you all kind of like meet up in the middle, and that means the best people typically get to fight these mini bosses, and it also means that they don't often realistically get too many kills. Here, an important bit for path 4, here they are checking out champion. That is actually the first time I see that, but fairly interesting placement. Definitely has his counters there though. You can bring in She-Hulk or Captain America Infinity War, and I reckon they would completely dominate that fight. So I'm not entirely sure behind the thought there. And let's move on to Battle Group 1. And in Battle Group 1 we have a Thing boss. Now Thing is always somewhat annoying boss, and to be honest, that's one of my biggest fears in AW is rank 3 Thing boss, because rank 5 5-star Thing is already difficult enough to deal with. Rank 2 6-star, if somebody has SIG 200, would be already much bigger chance of a timeout, and a rank 3 6-star Thing I think would pretty much get a kill currently for a good month or two every war. I think that would probably be the scariest boss, because yes, there are champions who can deal with Thing bosses, but most of them do it in a nick of a time, barely, still make the fight extremely long, and there isn't like really any champion in a game that can take on a Thing boss and deal with it like super easily. Even if you have a good counter against the Thing, they typically do still take like quite a long time, and timeouts are possible. So I think in for foreseeable future, if anybody has a high SIG rank 3 6-star Thing, that's probably going to be the best boss option possible. And here reverse controls we have Havoc. That's also quite a tricky fight. Now Nick Fury Domino again on path 4. That seems to be something we favor quite a bit. And we have Man-Thing here on Limber Psychic Taunts node, which I actually also think could potentially be extremely annoying matchup. Again, encroaching stun, we have the Thing there, so you can see some patterns going on. But at the same time, let's go and check out what we are up against, and let's check out for Loki's defense. So we can see that path 4 again is Domino, and 3, that is like by far the most popular placement and one of the harder fights. Luckily for me, Quake absolutely shreds that fight. And then we have Vision Arcus, which actually could be quite a tricky placement over there, because it's aspect of war, there's extra power gain involved, so on and so forth. So it might not be too easy to deal with that, but then again, I think if you bring in Dr. Doom, you're probably not gonna have too much trouble. Just block and keep your rotations and get extra power gains and stuff. So Dr. Doom is definitely something I'd recommend testing out for that fight. Again, you can see here they are not committing too much to the bottom left, because again, as I mentioned before, these fights are easy if you have the right counters. So there's that. What else you can see? Emma Frost here on this Empowered Immunity node and Buffet node. That could potentially be quite an annoying placement, but I don't think it's like the worst thing to deal with. Once again, Dr. Doom boss. Killmonger on debuff immune I feel is a bit of a waste, because you typically do want Killmonger to get debuff, so he gains extra more power, so on and so forth. So placing Killmonger on debuff immune node is a bit weird. In my book, Mysterio on enhanced power gain node is not too bad, again, in my opinion, because you kind of want him to keep throwing his level 2s and then just take an opponent that can't miss. So this could technically kind of like be a really nice fight for Nick Fury or somebody. But these are the mini boss. The man thing, definitely a very popular placement for this mini boss line here as well. Have fought multiple man things over there, just because of how tanky he is. He's not like the easiest opponent to take down within an allocated time. Doc Ock on the safeguard, that's a bit weird. You have Nick Fury. This will be a tricky fight for sure. Buff Toggle Unstoppable and Brute Force, and Nick Fury is a tricky defender to face with, so this arguably might be one of the most trickiest fights on the map here that we are presented with. Then you have Darkhawk and Korg on reverse controls, which is not too bad. Ebony Maw on Aegis Intercept. Yes, and Mr. Sincer on Aegis Heavy Attack. I don't quite get that one, but that is what we are up against. Let's check out battle group number 2. From 4 Loki, and again Domino on 3. That is a very kind of like popular placement. A Modok on Aspect of War. I don't think this is too bad to deal with, because he doesn't really have any external power gain and stuff. But yeah, there we go. Might be quite annoying though at the point when he goes unblockable if you don't have anything to counter it, but we'll see. How's that? On the right side here, Nova on Aegis Intercept. I think kind of misses the mark a bit as well, but the idea there is quite good, because Nova gets power and he's dashing when you're trying to intercept. We'll see how that works out. And Punisher 2099 on Safeguard, and nothing too scary. You have Korg on this Empowered Immunity node. Korg's always annoying, but for most likely he's just gonna get quaked over there. Nick Fury on this level 1. Now that could be an annoying fight, because Nick Fury would be stun immune throughout the fight. He'd be throwing more level 1s than usual, and not only his level 1 could be unblockable, so yeah, that could be quite annoying. Once again, Vision Arcus here on the left side, definitely an annoying fight. And Nihilus on stun immune node needs a specific counter, and man thing. So this battle group placement does seem quite a bit trickier, just because of the mini bosses. Mini bosses definitely do seem quite a bit scarier. And we have Warlock as a boss, and Warlock, well, the best counter for him for the most part, one of the best counters, typically is Hyperion if you play well, because Hyperion can do a lot of damage in very small amount of contact hits, because his level 1 doesn't make contact, and that is definitely one of the kind of like most popular counters. So global node is Siphon, so it doesn't really affect Warlock, so that's a good thing, because typically people place Bulwark if they place Warlock as a final boss. So then you can't bring in like Corvus or anything like that to deal a lot of damage in one go, because that kind of works as a somewhat a safeguard for metal champions. But we saw that there was no Bulwark, so I think that Warlock boss would be relatively easily to deal with. So here my alliance mates already have started attacking in battle group 1. But let's check out again Killmonger on that debuff immune node. Maybe they know something I don't, but I still don't think that is a great placement. But hey, Man Thing on the stun immune, this counter tactics node, that is a tricky placement for sure. And Vision Arcus again on enhanced level 2. Now Dr. Doom and Iron Man Infinity War, tricky lane for reverse controls, definitely. Both of them are quite annoying to deal with. Here in section 1, again Domino on 3 and Nick Fury on the second fight in path 4. These are like two most dominant placements on path 4 for sure, by far in my opinion. And then again, like nothing overly special. Thing and Korg there, that's also fairly standard, which our alliance use and most alliances use in general. So yeah, pretty much here we can see, so these are 6 battle group defense examples. You can see what works out for you, how these are placed. If you want, you can obviously rewind the video, check it again, watch it again, and grab some ideas, which champions you can find there, champions you can't find here. How Nightcrawler on Safeguard node, that's actually quite an intriguing fight. But yeah, for most part, you can see kind of like the same set of 45 to 50 champions placed on defense in every battle group, in every team, and the placement of them is kind of tossed about, because the God's honest truth, quite often it doesn't really matter too much. Aside from like few of the key nodes, everything is relatively easily counterable, and everything is relatively easily brought down in top tier wars currently. The biggest problems are like these few select nodes, like enhanced power gain, maybe debuff immunity, maybe boss fight, maybe this safeguard fight and path 4 over here. But for path 1 to 3, for path 6 to 8, typically there's nothing like too difficult, and when people do die multiple times in the lane, it's typically because they mess up, or I mess up, or whatever. It's not because that was like a great placement. And for most part, Alliance just kind of like randomly rotate champions about for about 40 out of the 50 defense nodes, leave the 10 important difficult fights kind of like purposely tricky, and then the rest of the defenders are getting kind of like swapped about in the fields, because it doesn't really matter when Medusa can be placed on this extended down the determination, whatever. If anybody brings in decent counter, Medusa is not going to be a hard fight anymore. And that is unfortunately kind of like a shift for Alliance Wars, because a year ago or 2 years ago, some placements were extremely difficult to counter with only 1 or 2 different counters, and even when you had a good counter, it was a tricky fight, like on an old Alliance War map when you had Killmonger on 29, so on and so forth. On this new map, these nodes are a lot more random. They seem to be made much less for specific champions, and there aren't too many great combinations where there is a champion that's placed on a specific node is incredibly difficult. Now, everybody has that illusion that the defense has to be perfect, everything has to be placed specific way to find some sort of magical combination for it to be hard to be dealt with. Unfortunately, Alliance Wars haven't really worked like that for quite a while. Now it's a bit more about champions themselves than the nodes, and the nodes that have been designed for this Alliance War map are arguably, for most part, much more generic. They do not help specific champions as much as the old ones used to, and therefore dealing with Alliance War map much more often actually means dealing with the champions that are placed rather than the nodes. Again, like as an example, you can take a look here. Redouble determination, extend. It kind of helps Medusa a bit, but at the same time, if you were in Act 6, these would be the nodes that you kind of ignore and you look for like your biohazard or something more tricky and difficult. Now again, you have Strike Back as the only kind of like node, but Strike Back is a node you can work around with by not launching special attacks, so good. Take a look here. Now you have the node active here, Close Encounters and Hurt Locker. These are literally the generic general nodes of 6.1. So there's a ton of champions who can deal with them well. It affects the way you play, but any champion for most part can deal with that, and it's much more important what's placed there, the fact that it is Hyperion, not what node it is on. And yeah, let's go here. Champion, what node does he has? Long distance relationship, Tyranny. Again, you don't care for long distance relationship or the Tyranny node too much. What you do care about is the fact that it is a champion and you want to bring in something that deals with champion fight. And same goes for vast majority of the things, with the exception of like path 4, with the exception of this safeguard fight, with the exception of a couple of mini bosses. The rest of it is changed a lot, and to be quite honest, it doesn't really matter where you play, so long as you have tricky defenders all across the board, because those nodes are seemingly a bit watered down. So there is good things for that, and obviously there are bad things for that. But I just wanted to definitely make sure that people understand the fact that vast majority of Alliance War Defender placements do not really matter. What matters is what defenders you bring in more, much more than where they are on the map. But all that being said, I have kept you guys for long enough. And if you liked today's video, then hit that like button, hit that sub button, and I'm gonna catch you guys soon. See ya.